Mr. President, I hope that one day soon it won't be necessary to come to the floor of this Senate and shine a spotlight on how the Trump administration is making it harder and harder for women in America to get the health care they need and deserve. It seems like not a week goes by without the Trump administration full-on attacking women's health care. It's the agenda of what I call health care discrimination, and it is out in full force. The latest news came out officially less than 24 hours ago. The Trump administration has put itself right in the middle of women and their doctors, denying access to critical information that millions of women rely on from physicians and nurses, the very providers they trust and depend on. What this means is that across this country, you can say goodbye to the guarantee that women are getting the whole story about their health and the options they have for their care. For millions of women, the health care they need is going to have to get a Trump stamp of approval. That Trump stamp of approval is going to be the requirement to get the care they need. I just want my colleagues here in the Senate to say that I think this alone makes a mockery of all the talk I remember hearing from colleagues in this body, from Republican colleagues, who said there's going to be patient-centered care in America. The developments in the last 24 hours basically say that with respect to health care, it's not going to be patient-centered care, it's going to be politics-centered care. Now, that patient-centered care concept was one of the most common talking points I remember hearing again and again. We heard it in the Finance Committee. We had the honor to be the ranking Democrat. We heard it again and again. We're going to have patient-centered care, and it was part of the crusade to repeal the Affordable Care Act. The whole point of that patient-centered care slogan was to say that the government shouldn't come between patients and their doctors, that it wasn't going to be about politics. It was going to be about patients and making sure that politics and the government didn't come between patients and their doctors. So here we are now, a few months later, and the Trump administration has just decided point blank that it will decide what is best for women in Oregon and across the country. They basically said it ought to be able to gag doctors and deny women the right to hear about health care options that fortunately are perfectly legal in America today. The fact is, this new decree, this dictate from the Trump administration comes with a battery of new restrictions on health care clinics that millions of women depend on every single day. We all know what it's about. It's an attack on Planned Parenthood. It's an attack on vital sources of care for women. And as I've said on this floor, Mr. President, I've gone through it again and again, the vast amount of work done by Planned Parenthood has nothing to do with abortion. It's all about vital preventive services for women that, by the way, are especially important in rural areas, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about women's health care tomorrow in the Senate Finance Committee, where we'll be having a hearing specifically on rural health care. There is bipartisan interest in that topic, but I want colleagues to know it's pretty hard to promote all of the opportunities for sound health care and bipartisanship when you have a decision from the Trump administration that has the potential to hit women's health care in rural communities like a wrecking ball. In states like Oregon, thousands and thousands of women live in communities where there's not a clinic or a doctor's office every few miles. If the Trump administration finds a backdoor way to shutter the few options these women have today, they may not have anywhere else to turn to get the essentials of health care. Women could lose the right to see the doctor of their choosing. And I'll just say it point blank, Mr. President. If somebody wants to take away the right of women in America to see the doctors and the providers of their choice, they're going to have to run over me. And I'll tell you, I think women are going to win that fight. To have women lose access to life-saving services like cancer screenings, routine physicals, birth control, prenatal care, and so much more, that ought to be off the table to politics. It shouldn't be about Democrats and Republicans. It should be about common sense approaches to ensure that women have all of the options about the health care they want and deserve. Taking health care choices away from women is fundamentally wrong. Depriving women of essential health care information that they have every right to hear about is fundamentally wrong. The Trump administration putting itself between women and their doctors is fundamentally wrong. The decision that came down last night, that we learned about last night, is a reckless one. It is a harmful one. And we ought to make no mistake about it. It is going to make health care worse for women across the country. I've now had to say it too many times to count it. It's long past time for these attacks on women's health care to end. I hope it won't be necessary to come to this floor again, Mr. President, that the Trump administration will see how flawed the decision, the dictate that came down last night is, and that they will retract it. But until they do, I will come to this floor and make the case for ensuring that women are empowered in our country to be able to see the health care providers of their choice, to have the opportunity for this vast array of services that are largely preventive from sea to shining sea. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.